point Big Trouble in Little China, in which Jack Burton quoted that it's all in the reflexes. I would like to refine it a little more. Medically speaking, when it comes to managing any sort of emergency situation, it's all about acquired reflexes. To refine these reflexes, conditioning is mandatory. So, this is the whole concept of our workshop. We'll be having various skill stations by experts on emergencies like preeclampsia, massive hemorrhage, sepsis, and maternal cardiac arrest. We will also have panel discussion on how to set up off critical care units. All sessions will be interactive, and in between the sessions, we will have audience poll. So be alert. Question will pop up on your screens, which you will have to answer within 30 seconds. And later on, the results will be displayed. We would also like you to stress upon some housekeeping rules. First, please make sure that your microphone is muted throughout the session. Please post your questions in the chat box anytime throughout the session, and we will try to address all of them. For any technical support, you please contact the India CME. So I hope you are ready. So let's get started. We will start with our first session. The first session is preeclampsia, screen early, act early. I would like to introduce the faculty. Dr. Ashwini Kuberan, current assistant professor in JIPMER, Puducherry, MD anesthesia from PGI, and was former assistant professor in PGI Chandigarh. Her main interests are obstetric critical care, quality improvement studies, ERAS programs in obstetric anesthesia, and robotics surgery.
Thank you, Ankita, for such a warm introduction. Again, warm afternoon for all the faculties of AOA. A special good afternoon to Professor Kajal ma'am and Professor Anju ma'am. So let us start our first station. So the first station is like we are going to see the management of eclampsia with some video demonstrations. PPTs. So myself, Dr. Ashwini, Dr. Nitika from PGI Chandigarh, and Dr. Anish from JIPMER will be coordinating this session. So we will be showing you few videos which are role played by our anesthesia residents on eclampsia and its management, and we will be discussing upon that. So the educational video does not cover comprehensive management of eclampsia. Few critical steps are highlighted. No patients are involved. Characters are role played by anesthesia residents. Vitals like saturation, blood pressure are simulated. The objectives of this session would be emphasize on maternal stabilization during and after eclampsia, how to manage recurrent seizures, how to make a decision to deliver in an eclamptic woman, management of hypertensive acute pulmonary edema, and how to choose the mode of anesthesia in a post-eclamptic woman. So now it is time 10 a.m. We are in OG casualty. We have a patient here. She is 25-year-old primary. She is referred from a nearby PHC. She has a referral letter which mentions that she is 36 weeks of gestation with a history of headache since previous night. Her blood pressure recorded was 180/110 mmHg. She was given a stat dose of tablet labetalol in the PHC and was referred to further management. So now in our OG casualty, we have nursing officer who receives the patient and briefs to the obstetrician. So in our OG casualty, the nursing officer receives the patient and briefs about the patient to the obstetrician on duty. So let us see how the case goes. So in the first station, we will be dealing with management of eclampsia. So myself, Dr. Ashwini, Dr. Nitika from PGI Chandigarh, Dr. Anish from JIPMER Puducherry will be coordinating this session. So we will be showing you few role-played videos of eclampsia and its management, and we will be discussing upon that. So my disclaimers are, this educational video does not cover comprehensive management of eclampsia. Only few critical steps are highlighted. No patient is involved. Characters are role played by anesthesia residents. Vitals like saturation and blood pressure are simulated. The objectives of this session would be emphasize on maternal stabilization during and after eclampsia, how to manage recurrent seizures, how to decide to deliver in eclamptic women, management of hypertensive acute pulmonary edema, and how to choose mode of anesthesia in a post-eclamptic women. So now we are in OG casualty. Now the time is 10 a.m. So we receive a patient in OG casualty of Jipma Hospital. She has a referral letter with her which states that she is 36 weeks of gestation with a history of headache since previous night with a blood pressure 180/110 recorded in the primary health center. They have given a start dose of labetalol 100 mg and referred to Jipma for further management. So in the OG casualty, we have our nursing officer as well as obstetrician on duty. So let us see how the case goes.
Dr. G, we have received a referral slip of a 25-year-old bride with 36 weeks gestation. She had a high BP recording yesterday, like 180/100 BP recording is there, and she was having a history of headache. So they had treated her outside at a PHC and they had given her 1 dose of labetalol. Now she has come here now. What should
Or you make her lie on the bed and attach monitors and take a BP recording and take her a saturation and come in.
Ashwin, the volume is low.
ஐயோ மேடம் தலைவலிக்குது நம்ம கொஞ்சம் கழிச்சு படுங்க நேர படுங்க கழிச்சு படுங்க மானிட்டர்ஸ் அட்டாச் பண்ணலாம் ஈஸி பார்க்கலாம்
தலைவலிக்குது மேடம் ரொம்ப வலிக்குது
சரியாயிருக்கும்
தாங்க பண்ணுங்க மேடம் பண்ணுங்க மேடம்
சரி பார்க்கலாம் டாக்டர் BP is very high. We'll secure an IV channel connection. Okay. Can you please help me? Yeah. கையில சின்ன ஒரு ஊசி போட்டோம்.
சரிங்க சின்ன ஊசி நான் கையில சரி She going up. You should go and call her.
Yes. Yes, sir. She's throwing seizure, ma'am. Oh, she's throwing seizure. Sister ji, bring the eclampsia back. Okay, Doctor ji. Is oxygen on? Sister ji, connect the suction catheter. Yes, Doctor ji. What is the saturation?
92 ma'am. What are you looking at?
This patient had just had seizures, right? We'll have to see if her airway is patent. If she's having a tongue bite, we might have to connect an airway. To avoid aspiration, we have put her in lateral position. That is why we have kept suction catheter also ready. Sister ji, load 4 grams of magnesium sulfate, add it in a 100 ml NS and give slow IV over 15 minutes. Okay, doctor.
Ma'am, still BP is 170/100 ma'am. What can we do ma'am next?
Give injection labetalol 20 milligram IV over 2 minutes. Sister ji, please continue magnesium sulfate infusion at 1 gram per hour once this is over. Okay.
So let me summarize what happened exactly in the past 2 to 3 minutes. So the patient came with high BP records. She started throwing seizures after admission, and once she started throwing seizures, the on-duty obstetrician immediately called for help and she started supplementing oxygen to the patient. And after that, the nursing officer raised the side rails of the bed to prevent maternal injuries and she went to call for help. And as soon as the call for help has come, the senior resident who has come, so she started observing whether the airway was patent, whether she was breathing, whether supplemental oxygen was delivered, whether circulation is stable and not compromised. She ensured the patient is in left lateral positioning and also ensured that suction is ready in case if we require to aspirate any secretions. So basically, when a seizure episode occurs, the first step would be stabilization of mother with emphasis on airway, breathing and circulation. And also it is important to avoid physical injuries during the seizure episodes. So once the patient is stabilized, the next step, like as we have seen in the video, the obstetrician has to shift the eclampsia cart, making like after she made a provisional diagnosis of eclampsia. So she has asked the sister to give Maxelf loading dose of 4 gram over 10 to 15 minutes. So the recommended dose for magnesium sulfate is 4 to 6 gram loading dose over 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 1 to 2 gram per hour. So after that, the important thing we have to do is control of hypertension. So before going into control of hypertension, so let us shortly see the definition of eclampsia. Eclampsia is defined as new onset tonic-clonic focal or multifocal seizures in the absence of other causative conditions such as epilepsy, cerebral arterial ischemia and infarction, intracranial hemorrhage or drug use. The diagnosis of eclampsia is secured in the presence of seizure, proteinuria and hypertension, but hypertension and proteinuria are not mandatory to make diagnosis of eclampsia, because in 20 to 40% of the cases, hypertension or proteinuria is absent. The time of onset can be anywhere after 20 weeks of pregnancy, in antepartum, intrapartum as well as in the postpartum period. And in 80% of the cases, most of the women have premonitory symptoms like headache, visual disturbances and altered mental status. So, how to control sustained hypertension or severe hypertension? ACOG recommends these 3 drugs, that is IV labetalol, IV hydralazine and oral nifedipine. So we can, it equally recommends these 3 class of drugs. Depending upon the patient's comorbid condition, we can choose the drug. The most common preferred drug is labetalol because of the shorter onset of action. But in case if your patient is asthmatic patient or compromised cardiac status patient, then you can choose other drugs. Or in case if you don't have IV cannula or if you are taking time to secure IV cannula, then you can go with oral nifedipine tablets as well. This protocol gives the time frame how to go about in the management of severe hypertension. So severe hypertension is defined by ACOG as systolic more than 160 and diastolic more than 110 mmHg, which is persistent for more than 15 minutes. So for example, if you choose labetalol, first you can give 20 mg bolus IV. After 10 minutes, you can again repeat the BP. In case if it is still severe, you can again repeat the second dose with 40 mg of IV labetalol. After 20 minutes, again you have to measure, again you can give 80 mg of labetalol. So after 30 minutes, still if the BP is still persistently high, you can choose other class of drug. So this time frame, you can see the time frame for the other class of drugs like IV hydralazine and nifedipine as well. So we have our first audience poll question. Mr. Ashish, can you just display it in the delegates view? So the time given for this first audience poll question is 30 seconds. So once we are done, we will discuss the results of it as and when the time permits. You can also put your questions in the chat box so that we can discuss the questions as and when we find time for it. So now we are going into the second scene. So now the time is 10:30. So now the mother is stabilized. She's still in OG casualty. So what should we do once the mother is stabilized?
Ashwin, you need to, Ashwini,
Yes, ma'am.
the question, you need to discuss the question.
Okay, so we'll wait for the answer and then but the correct answer is 1 because the ACOG recommends a loading dose of 4 to 6 gram IV over 10 to 15 minutes. So they have done many studies to see the serum plasma concentration of magnesium to achieve the therapeutic concentrations. So mostly with 4 to 6 gram, the therapeutic concentrations are attained. So the right answer is first one, that is loading dose 4 to 6 gram IV followed by an infusion of 1 to 2 gram per hour. So we'll proceed to the second scene. So now the time is around 10:30. We are still in OG casualty. The patient is stabilized. And now let us see what happens next. So how the patient is managed.
The patient stable. Vitals are stable, ma'am, but CTG is showing late deceleration. We proceed for cesarean section right now, ma'am.
These changes are transient, Sahitya. It is mostly because of hypoxia and hypercarbia associated with the seizure. Usually it will resolve spontaneously. If deceleration persists, then we might consider C-section. For now, it is not indicated.
But ma'am, should we consider any other cause for seizure, ma'am?
Yeah, but this most likely looks like eclamptic seizures because patient had high BP recording and she also had imminent signs like headache. But still, we should elicit a proper history and do a thorough physical examination to rule out other causes. Sahitya, I'll go talk to the attenders. I'll elicit a proper history and I'll also brief them about the incident, whatever it has happened. Meanwhile, you do a CNS examination for this patient.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So once the patient stabilized and after obtaining the history and physical examination, the patient was catheterized and a PV was done, which showed the cervix is favorable and patient is in labor. The CNS examination revealed the patient is conscious, drowsy, but responding to commands. Pupils were reacting to light, all reflexes were normal, and the senior resident advised for continuous fetal monitoring.
நீங்க உங்களுக்கு என்ன வேணும்?
அப்பா
எங்க பாத்துட்டு இருந்தீங்க இவ்வளவு நாளா?
எனக்கு கடலூர் ஜிஹெச்ல பார்த்தேன்.
இதுக்கு முன்னாடி எந்த தொந்தரவுமே இருந்தது இல்ல. எல்லா ஊசி மாத்திரை எல்லாம் கரெக்டா போட்டுட்டு இருந்தாங்க. முன்னாடி பிபி அதிகமாலாம் எதுவுமே கிடையாது. முன்னாடி வலிப்பு எதுவும் வந்திருக்கா?
இல்லங்க, அதுவும் இல்ல.
மாத்திரை வேற எதுவும் சாப்பிடுறாங்களா?
இல்ல மேடம்.
வேற எந்த தொந்தரவுமே இருந்தது இல்ல. I have elicited a thorough history. It looks like eclamptic seizures only. Okay. Ask the sister to shift the patient to eclampsia room in an oxygen trolley. Meanwhile, get an ultrasound machine shifted to check the fetal heart. Yes. And also send a basic hemogram, RFT, LFT, coagulation profile, cross-matching and blood grouping.
Yes, ma'am.
And also give a reference to anesthetist and also a neonatologist.
Okay.
So what we have learned from the last part, like once the patient is stabilized, the next step is to confirm the diagnosis, like whether the patient had eclampsia or should we consider other causes of seizures. So the complete history and physical examination will help us to come to the diagnosis. Once the patient is diagnosed as eclampsia are all critically ill patients who require HDU or ICU monitoring depending upon their general and hemodynamics. So continuous and frequent vital monitoring and control of blood pressure is highly recommended. And apart from that, we have to investigate the mother with all routine lab investigations like hemogram, renal function test, liver function test to see whether the disease is progressive or in case she is developing HELP or any kind of renal dysfunction. So to completely evaluate her, we will be requiring panel of lab investigations. Also to decide about the plan of anesthesia and to decision to deliver. So for the entire plan of management, we need the complete lab investigations. And then continuous fetal monitoring is also recommended. Apart from that, a reference to anesthesiologist and neonatologist or sent. So when a call comes to the anesthesiologist, we go and see the patient well in hand before so that we can plan our anesthesia. Also, we can manage the complications either during or before the administration of anesthesia. So we have to know the complete detailed history, physical examination, status, everything before we go to management of such patients. So now, so in our patient, we had hypertension and her eclampsia was very transient, which lasted for a few seconds, and then she regained her consciousness. So we made a tentative diagnosis of eclampsia. Now, the question which comes to our mind is, when should we consider other causes of seizures apart from eclampsia when a patient throws seizures in the casualty? I think Dr. Anish can highlight on this part. Anish, sir?
Yeah. Thank you, Ashwini, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of the team. So just discussing about the seizure, when a patient, antenatal patient present to the casualty with seizure, the presumptive diagnosis is to be considered is eclampsia. But however, with time and with the advent of more and more use of imaging, it has been found that when a patient comes with seizure, it could be some other reasons which sometimes we need to intervene much earlier. So it's like highlighted that we need to have a thorough physical examination, at least to highlight, we should check the pupils, whether there is any unequal pupils are there, which again is a sign of a raised ICT, and may be suggestive that there is some other pathology going on inside the intracranial cavity. Then you should check for whether there is any focal neurological deficit. So usually in an eclampsia, you don't find there is any neurological deficit or the pupils are going to be equal. So if these signs are there, then you should think of other causes, which includes intracranial hemorrhage as one of the commonest one. When we take a history, you should always ask two things. Is there anyone who would have witnessed the seizure? Most of the time, these women are with their mothers or mother-in-laws, which will be, at term, somebody will be taking care of them, and somebody might have witnessed the seizure. So it's very important to elicit the semenology of the seizures to know that was it a focal onset seizures or is it a generalized tonic-clonic seizures. So again, the focal onset seizures might be suggestive of, it may not be hypertension related, but might be suggestive of granuloma or a tuberculoma, and it may also point towards the possibility of other causes like, again, IC bleed or CVT or other causes. So in the casualty, again, the few investigation which could be done on a bedside, one of the reasons why a patient can have a GTCS is hypoglycemia. Sometimes these women have problems in eating because they might be feeling retching or this thing because of the stomach per se compressed by the grown uterus. So the patient might not be eating properly. So hypoglycemia is to be ruled out at the bedside itself in casualty before they could be shifted. And when we send the investigation, we will be getting clues whether it could be some other metabolic causes like electrolyte disturbances or maybe because of hepatic or renal failure. So the lesson is that any patient with antenatal seizure to be considered as eclampsia, but a simple bedside looking for a focal neurological deficit, and eyes pupils are equal or not, and maybe checking up, looking for the glucose levels and looking for the other investigation might give a clue whether sometimes we need to intervene early in cases where there is an intracranial hemorrhage so that patient can be salvaged. So Ashwini.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think we missed the sugar testing in the bedside while we are managing the patient. So thank you for highlighting us, sir. Thank you so much. So we'll go on to the next slide. So we have our, I just now saw that the first audience poll question, almost 100% of them have answered as the first answer. So everybody is going on the right lane. So this is our audience poll question 2. Mr. Ashish can display this in the delegates view. So we'll wait for the answers. A term pregnant woman admitted to emergency with GTCS, first drug to be administered is. So our 30 seconds is over. Mr. Ashish, can you display the answers to us?
Yeah, we'll publish the answer 2 minutes.
Okay, okay. Should we proceed, ma'am, or we shall wait for the answers to come?
I think you wait for the answers.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll wait, ma'am.
I request the delegates to please put their questions in the chat box. We'll take it up after the tabulation.
Yeah, whenever we have time, we can discuss the. Yes, I think the answer has come. Okay, so now most of them have answered as phenytoin, the first drug to be administered, but the answer is here magnesium sulfate. Because again now until otherwise ruled out, the first diagnosis when a pregnant woman comes with a GTCS, the first diagnosis to be made is eclampsia, and the eclampsia seizures are very transient and it will get settled soon. So the answer is magnesium sulfate, but Dr. Anish was discussing with me this, we expected this answer actually. Because sir, can you just say that You were saying that there are few school of thoughts that even no, the first episode of seizure, you used to give lorazepam as well.
Yeah,
So can you just, yes, sir.
Yeah, if you could see the textbooks and what is being practiced in most of the centers, if it's a patient comes with the first seizure, we actually don't give anything to abort the seizure. We wait,
Yes, sir.
just make her just what was done in the video, like we just get her on to secure the airway and just make her lie down on one of the lateral positions so that the oxygenation and there's no secretions which goes into the airway and causes complications later on. And then we take the IV magnesium sulfate and we can give the max up so that it attains some level, and then we can administer the IM doses if you are going for an IM regime, or continue as an IV infusion as was told in the video. So we don't administer phenytoin, is not considered as a first choice, but in cases where there is a refractory seizures, or in some states, if the patient is having a seizure, there is a chance that hypoxia to build up and the baby might be in trouble. Like in the video, the president was reporting to the senior resident that there was late deceleration, which is probably suggestive that there is some amount of hypoxia was there during the time of the seizures. But usually noted those decelerations recover once the patient is oxygenated and once the patient have the seizure completed, and then patient recovers. So we don't prefer to give a lorazepam, but in cases where it continues and then it's going for a refractory seizure, the drug of choice is a short-acting lorazepam, which could be given on a bedside with monitoring.
Yeah. So you recommend to give lorazepam only in the cases of recurrent seizures. So for the first episode of seizure, mostly we go with Maxelf, right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you for clearing the doubt, sir. So we'll go to the next slide. A short note on this magnesium sulfate.
Actually, just 1 second. I'm telling
you. Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Not as a seizure agent, we are going to go with
lorazepam. Yes, sir.
Only for aborting the episode of seizure. If it's going to be prolonged, we use a lorazepam. Otherwise, the drug of choice remains as magnesium sulfate.
Magnesium sulfate. Yeah, you're just trying to highlight that in case if the seizure is prolonged, in that case, we would prefer to give IV lorazepam to abort the seizure at that point of time. Magnesium sulfate is primarily given not to abort the seizures, just to prevent, it is given primarily to prevent the recurrence of seizures. So we have already discussed about magnesium sulfate. So it is a drug of choice in eclampsia to prevent the subsequent convulsive episodes. So the dose already we have highlighted it. It is 4 to 6 gram loading dose over 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 1 to 2 gram IV infusion per hour. So what we should monitor after administration of magnesium sulfate? So the 3 things we should monitor are deep tenon reflexes, respiratory rate, and urine output. Magnesium sulfate is entirely excreted in the urine. So urine output, strict input-output monitoring should be done. So routinely monitoring of therapeutic concentrations of magnesium is not recommended. So we can use these clinical parameters, like when there is a loss of deep tenon reflexes, you can suspect there is a magnesium toxicity. In that cases, you can monitor the serum magnesium levels. Otherwise, when patient is having a renal dysfunction like creatinine more than 1.2 or where there is oliguria, then serum magnesium monitoring is, or the plasma magnesium monitoring is mandated. So we should be very careful in patients who have renal dysfunction, and whenever the patient is having acute pulmonary edema also, we have to, in case if you want to administer Maxelf, you wait until the patient stabilizes after acute pulmonary edema, and then you can give, because Maxelf itself will aggravate the incident of acute pulmonary edema.
Ashwini, just wanted to add one more thing.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
We talked about the IV regime, which has been used in most of the countries and in some of the states. If you see the confidential inquiry of maternal death and the subsequent suggestion by the Kerala Maternal Morbidity and Mortality Group, it was suggested to be changed over to the IV regime. So in most of the centers, as far as I know in Kerala, they have changed over to the IV regime. But in high volume centers where, one-to-one monitoring or one-to-one patient care is, much problematic or logistic issues are there, most of the centers prefer to give the IM regimes. So the common one which we follow even in JIPMER is the low-dose DACA regime. where you give 4 grams of 50%, 20% loading magnesium sulfate over 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 3 grams on each buttock. So total 10 grams of IV load, 10 grams as a loading dose, split into IV and the IM dose is given, and then followed by 2.5 milligram maintenance dose is given in the DACA regime. Whereas there is a modified PICHA regime which we used to use, where we used to give 10 grams, again followed by 4 grams of IM magnesium sulfate. So there are various regimes across the country which has been followed, but maybe with each center with having the better experience, they might be able to follow the regime which is followed in their own center. So, but the universally accepted one, or the one which is proposed, is the one which is been discussed in the video.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So we are moving on to the scene 3. Now the time is 11 a.m. So in the previous video, the obstetrician gave instructions to shift the patient to eclampsia room. So let us see what happens in the eclampsia room. Now the anesthetist arrives to the scene to see the patient and to give opinion.
Hi, are you the OTCR?
Yes, ma'am.
We are the anesthesia team and we received a referral regarding an eclampsia patient.
She is the patient, ma'am.
Okay.
Actually, patient was a 25-year-old female, ma'am, driving at 36 weeks. She came to the hospital at 10 a.m. in the morning, ma'am, with symptoms of one episode of headache. And after being admitted here, she threw one episode of seizure, ma'am. She was started on labetalol 10 mg and the Maxwell bolus dose, along with infusion 1 gram per hour has been given, ma'am. Like right now, her vitals are stabilized, but still BP is on higher side. It's on 170/100, ma'am. Investigations has been done. Reports are still awaited. So she's having a second episode of seizure.
Sushmita, please check the oxygen tubes. Also connect the suction catheter.
Yes, sir.
Sahitya, please attach the pulse oximetry probe and also measure another blood pressure. I'll take care of the airway. I'll see if it is patent. What is the saturation, Sahitya?
94, sir.
Okay. Can you increase the O2 flow, Sushmita? NIBP reading, Sahitya?
170/100, sir.
Okay, the BP is still high. Okay, let us first stabilize the patient. Airway seems to be patent. There are a lot of secretions coming through the patient's mouth. Please give the suction, Sushmita. Okay, thank you, Sushmita. Is the saturation improving, Sahitya?
Better, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Now the seizures are resolved. Can we consider another bolus dose of magnesium
Yes,
sulfate
sir,
in this
we consider.
patient? Yes. So the BP is still 170/100, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think we can give another dose of labetalol
Okay,
20
I'll
milligram
give,
IV in this patient.
The patient has already had 2 episodes of seizures by now. Why don't we consider intubation in view of high risk of aspiration?
Most of the eclamptic seizures are self-limiting and they last only for a short duration of action of approximately 60 seconds. And also when the seizure gets over, the patient enters into a post-ictal state and the airway reflexes return most of the time. So what we have to do is we have to vigilantly monitor the patient, looking for airway patency, saturation, and the breathing pattern, and we can ensure that the patient remains in the lateral position to prevent aspiration. And also we have to ensure that a proper working suction source is present near the patient end.
Then when do we consider intubation in cases of recurrent seizures?
Endotracheal intubation is considered to be appropriate only in situations where there is loss of airway reflexes. Such a situation can arise like in a situation where we have to give drugs like benzodiazepines as a desperate measure to control seizures which are refractory to magnesium sulfate therapy, or in the case like when the patient has a poor GCS. Good that you have reminded. We'll keep an intubation cart ready and be prepared.
Acuity of the patient seems to be dropping over a few minutes, sir. Let me check for the adequacy of oxygenation and let us give a proper position for this patient also, sir.
Yeah, I'll do that. And also please auscultate the lung fields of the patient.
Okay, sir.
அம்மா மூச்சு வாங்குதாமா?
அம்மா லைட்டா மூச்சு வாங்குற மாதிரி இருக்கு.
பயப்படாதீங்க, சரியாயிடும்.
சரி.
The patient seems to be having diffuse coarse crepitations all over her lung field, sir.
I think the patient is starting to have pulmonary edema owing to her risk factors associated with preeclampsia. Please prepare to give injection Lasix 40 mg IV stat. Meanwhile, we will do a lung ultrasound to confirm the presence of pulmonary edema. நுரையீரல்ல நீர் கோத்திருக்கான்னு பார்க்கணுமா? ஒரு ஸ்கேன் மட்டும் பண்ணிக்கிறேன். சரிங்களா?
சரி சார்.
Pulmonary edema using ultrasound.
Visualization of bilateral symmetrical B lines in both the lungs with progressive diminution of intensity from the bases to the upper zones will be suggestive of pulmonary edema.
What are B lines, sir?
B lines are basically ring down artifacts. They are generated whenever there is an alteration in the air fluid composition in the interstitia and the alveoli. They need not be pathological all of the times. They can be normally also seen in areas like lung bases where the hydrostatic pressure is going to be high, or in the areas of lung fissures where the connective tissue will be high with rich pulmonary vasculature.
So what are these pathological B lines?
So you deem B lines to be pathological only when you are visualizing more than 3 B lines in a single lung field or in a single intercostal space. What happens is when the alveoli is flooded with fluid, there will be formation of air fluid foam mixture. When this mixture is getting formed, there will be even more generation of B lines. And in most severe cases, all these B lines, single B lines, will coalesce together to form a thick white sheet. I can see pathological B lines in both the lung fields, in both the upper zones and the basal zones, but predominantly in the basal zones. This confirms our diagnosis of pulmonary edema. We have already given diuretics for this patient, so we will wait and observe the patient for improving signs.
Sir, why does these preeclamptic patients develop pulmonary edema, sir?
There are many risk factors which can be contributed to the occurrence of pulmonary edema in preeclampsia patients. Firstly, these patients will have increased pulmonary capillary permeability. Secondly, these patients have more chances to develop increase in the hydrostatic pressure, even with minor changes in the intravascular volume. Thirdly, these patients will have reduced colloid oncotic pressure because of excessive albuminuria. And fourthly, these patients have more chances of developing left ventricular systolic or diastolic dysfunction because of the prolonged increases in the afterload.
Sir, so what do we do if she throws another episode of seizure?
If the patient throws another episode of seizure, then we have to label that seizure as being refractory to magnesium sulfate therapy. In that case, we have been left with options like benzodiazepine only. In this scenario, we can give drugs like injection lorazepam 4 mg IV or injection diazepam 10 mg IV.
So we saw two scenarios, two complications, basically two complications of preeclampsia. So one is a recurrence of seizure, the other is acute pulmonary edema. So when the patient has second seizure, what should we do? So it is reported that 10% of the women usually have recurrent seizures. In that case, what is recommended is you can again repeat second bolus dose of Maxelf 2 gram over 3 to 5 minutes. So during the second episode seizure also, we have to ensure that ABCs are stabilized. So most of the time they are self-limited. Once the therapeutic concentrations are attained, the recurrence is unlikely. So when do we label the seizure as refractory? So as already said by Dr. Varun in the video, so whenever the patient is continuously having seizure after start of Maxelf at 20 minutes, or when there are more than 2 recurrent episodes of seizure, we label them as refractory seizures. So once we have a situation of refractory seizures, so we have to go for the other set of drugs to stop the convulsive episode. So most commonly recommended drug is IV lorazepam 4 gram IV over 3 to 5 minutes. So and when we have such diagnosis of refractory seizure, then we have to think of other causes of seizures apart from eclampsia. So I think Anish sir, can you say like when do you consider imaging when there is a situation of refractory seizure and not responding to Maxelf and the diagnosis is away from eclampsia? So when do you consider imaging, or when do you do that?
Yeah, thank you. The role of cerebral imaging in eclampsia, actually, if you it's actually there is a what do you call it? There is a divide between the world, between the high income countries and the low income countries. So any patient who walks in with an antenatal seizures in most of the developed countries have an imaging, whereas the facilities for that is not so available in countries like us, where we depend upon, we have got fewer logistics and fewer places where we could have an imaging. So we actually, of course, we have a presumptive diagnosis of eclampsia for everyone, and we prefer to do if there is a focal seizure, if there is a focal neurological deficit, if there is a pupils which are unequal, and the patient who continue to throw refractory seizures, and who is remaining at status eclampticus, so who is not recovering. And then in these cases, the chance of probability of one of the other differential diagnoses which we discussed earlier is pretty much high. So in those cases, we do imaging even before delivery at most of the times. Or if possible, if the delivery has to be taken into consideration, do we stabilize, we deliver the patient, and once the patient is intubated, and then with the help of the anesthesia team, we shift them for the imaging, and then do it in subsequently in the postpartum period.
Okay, sir. Sir, do we consider, or do you think, is there any role of imaging in confirmed diagnosis of eclampsia?
Yeah. Like one of the slides showed about the different pathophysiological process by which the eclampsia could be discovered. I mean, which could be happening. So currently, if you see the literature, much literature is coming up. The posterior reversible the PRESS syndrome is one of the, or maybe the reason behind the preeclampsia converting into an eclampsia. So if we do imaging in most of the patients, and we ourselves had a study, and I mean there was a couple of studies from PGI also, which has been reported that in near about 150 patients, we had 60 patients who had got other diagnoses other than the eclampsia. Few of them had granulomas, few of them had neurocystic sarcomas, few of them had tuberculoma. Nearly 10 patients had IC bleed. Some had got subarachnoid hemorrhage. So you are going to see a wide variation of, or wide differential diagnosis being masked out if you do an imaging, even in a patient with an eclampsia. But if the patient remains stable and your logistics does not allow you to do for all the patients, so you can choose with those with a high risk of having an underlying other differential diagnosis, like just we described.
Yes, so you promptly said that when the patient is stabilized and with the history and symptoms doesn't give us clue of other causes of seizures, and when the logistic issues are not favored, mostly we don't do imaging. Am I right, sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, sir, this question is also for you.
One more. Actually,
yes,
can we just skip that slide? I just want to discuss one more point.
Yes, sir.
If you go back, so conventionally, when the patient has one more seizure, a magnesium sulfate additional 2 grams has been administered, and subsequently, if you see the textbooks, classic textbook description is to give phenytoin loading followed by phenytoin 100 milligram 8th hourly. But recently, the trend has been to use more of levetiracetam, which actually covers a wide array of causes of seizures, and which is actually more better to control the recurrence of seizures in patients who has got refractory seizures. And there is an advantage which has been told, even though it is only a loading dose and may be given for a shorter period of time, there is a chance that in patients who have received phenytoin, their babies might develop cognitive disabilities, which has not been shown with levetiracetam. That's why slowly, but I think the levetiracetam might replace as the anti-seizure agent once the seizures are not getting controlled with magnesium sulfate.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So the studies are upcoming on that, right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sir, this question is also for you. So, when do you decide to deliver once the patient is confirmed as diagnosis of eclampsia?
Yeah.
When do you decide that?
Yeah, any patient who developed eclampsia is a candidate for delivery.
Okay.
So, I mean, this video is made for an educational purpose. So we are discussing it on a later time. But once the patient comes, especially at a patient who is more than 34 weeks, even you don't have to wait much for the fetal steroids to help in the pulmonary maturity. Otherwise, you can start on the fetal steroids, get the investigation, get the patient to stabilize, have an anesthesia consultation, and once the patient is stable and could be taken up for cesarean section, that time she could be taken. Or else, if the patient has to be stepped up for refractory or status eclampticus and put to be on ventilator, it's better to deliver the baby so that the effects of hypoxia and all those things could be minimized. And books and guidelines say about a faster delivery, but how fast is that it should be achieved is not given in any of the guidelines, but except for one of them, which says that all these deliveries has to be achieved within 24 hours. So which would be the mode of delivery? It is depending upon the obstetric expertise and the experience of the center. In our center and where from in Chandigarh too, I have observed that we used to give them to have a vaginal delivery, which is much safer, where the airway is going to be edematous and there are problems with even inducing anesthesia for those kind of patients who has eclampsia. So vaginal delivery is a safer option, but some centers say it should be delivered faster, and that has been taken into consideration, and most of these women undergo cesarean section too. So if a patient is hemodynamically stable and she just had one seizures, the investigation is absolutely normal, they can be considered for, under a vigilant monitoring, they could be considered for a vaginal delivery, which could be achieved faster.
So per se, eclampsia itself is not an indication for cesarean section, right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, sir. We have the third audience poll question. So the time starts now. Mr. Ashish can display this question on the delegate's view. The primary purpose of administration of magnesium sulfate in eclamptic women is whether to control blood pressure or whether to have tocolytic effect on the uterus, to prevent recurrent seizures, or whether to have neuroprotective effect on fetus. So we'll wait for the answers. So we'll move on to the next slides. So we'll just see brief about how to manage acute pulmonary edema with hypertension. So what we are going to deal is acute pulmonary edema with hypertension, because the management of acute pulmonary edema with hypotension is totally different. So in the background of preeclampsia with hypertension, so the first is stabilization, emphasize on ABCs, close monitoring of vitals. As we saw in the video, it is propped up position. You can administer furosemide 40 mg to promote diuresis and venodilation. Have a strict input-output charting and restrict IV fluids, like you can use undiluted concentrations of oxytocin. Avoid all precipitant drugs and IV fluids, and you can involve multidisciplinary team involvement to know the cause of pulmonary edema. So when we look at the cause of pulmonary edema, most of them, 60% of them, are because of hypertensive induced pulmonary edema. But in few studies, when they have done echo in patients who developed hypertensive pulmonary edema, 20 to 30% of them had cardiogenic or cardiovascular changes as well. So, when we see preeclamptic women, when they studied echocardiography of nearly 50 to 100 patients, all of them had either one or the other cardiovascular dysfunction, most predominantly being diastolic dysfunction. Apart from that, systolic dysfunction, dilated cardiomyopathy, or RA, RV, diastolic dysfunction are also reported. So, use of transthoracic echocardiography is highly recommended in the setting of acute pulmonary edema, because that will aid us in the diagnosis and streamline our management. So the goals would be to reduce left ventricular preload, afterload, to prevent myocardial ischemia. So the drug of choice in the setting of hypertensive pulmonary edema would be NTG. If you have closely watched the last video, like after the management of acute pulmonary edema, after stabilization, the SR would have asked to administer labetalol. So here the take home point is, even the peripartum cardiomyopathy can manifest with hypertensive pulmonary edema. In those cases, labetalol would be detrimental in causing depression of myocardial contractility. So the drug of choice in such states, that is hypertensive pulmonary edema, to get the echo done as soon as possible, and the first drug of choice would be nitroglycerin. NTG with a dose of 5 micrograms per minute, 3 to 5 minutes. Every time you can titrate to a higher dose up to 100 micrograms per minute. So the role of point of care ultrasound in preeclamptic women. It is highly recommended you do point of care ultrasound whenever you land up in complications, because it will help us in diagnosis and streamlining the management. For example, if the patient is having pulmonary B lines and if you do echo and you see diastolic dysfunction, it will more point towards preeclampsia. If the patient is having low ejection fraction and systolic dysfunction, it will point towards peripartum cardiomyopathy. If there is RA-RV dysfunction along with the venous ultrasound to be positive, it will point towards acute pulmonary embolism. So the use of POCUS will be very, very appreciated and highly recommended in the setting of complications when we encounter with preeclamptic and eclamptic women. So we have the last poll question. We will see the answers for the third poll question. So the third question has been 100% of them have correctly answered the purpose to be as prevent recurrent seizures. So we will wait for this question also. Meanwhile, we'll go to the fourth scene. So now patient is stabilized. Everything is going fine. Acute pulmonary edema is stabilized. Now at 4 p.m., the patient is planned for C-section. So we'll just shorten the video.
Ma'am, that eclamptic patient which you've seen before, we have planned for cesarean section, ma'am. We are terminating in view of erection delayed deceleration, ma'am.
Okay. Sir, Varun sir has given you over about one eclamptic patient now, sir. She is a 25-year-old tiny, 36 weeks of gestation with eclampsia, sir. Now posted for emergency LSCS in view of recurrent late deceleration, sir, under 9-2, sir. I've assessed the patient now, sir. She's conscious but drowsy, but is responding to commands, sir. Heart rate is 82 beats per minute. BP of 158 by 100 mm HD on maxillary infusion of 1 gram per hour, sir. Our last dose of labetalol was given at 1 p.m. SpO2 is 96% with 6 liters of oxygen by face mask. Respiratory rate is 14 per minute, sir. Urine output is adequate and tendon reflexes are normal. Hospitalization wise, chest seems to be clear compared to the previous values, sir. Investigation, HP is 10.3, total count of 7,000, platelets of 90,000, LFT, RFT are normal, sir, and PPIMR is 12.1 and 0.98.
Sushmita, it's a very high risk case. So I'll just inform the on-call consultant regarding this case.
I'll go and prepare the OT, sir.
Is the OT prepared, Sushmita?
Yes, sir, I'm preparing, sir.
Okay. What is the plan of anesthesia for this patient, Sushmita?
Sir, obviously general anesthesia, no, sir.
Why you want to give general anesthesia for this patient?
So this patient already had 2 episodes of seizures and is only now recovering from pulmonary edema. So I thought the best plan would be to administer general anesthesia, sir.
Just because the patient had increased BP recordings, she had prone seizures and she had pulmonary edema, we did not consider general anesthesia for this patient. We can also consider regional anesthesia by considering certain factors like patient GCS, hemodynamic parameters, and then patient lab parameters. So these 3 factors will decide the mode of anesthesia. And also we prefer regional anesthesia more than general anesthesia because regional anesthesia has its own advantages, like the patient will be pain free and it will make the patient to participate actively in the childbirth and also avoid the complication of GA. So mostly we prefer regional anesthesia when compared to general anesthesia.
Sir, but regional anesthesia causes profound hypotension and will be ending up giving a lot of fluids that might harm this patient, sir. So do we still proceed with regional anesthesia?
The incidence of profound hypotension is not very high in eclamptic women when compared to the pregnant women because of the higher levels of circulating catecholamines in the blood of these patients. We can manage this profound hypotension by giving fluids and vasopressors in a titrated manner. So we can proceed with regional anesthesia even we have these concerns.
Okay, sir, but I agree with you, but this patient still has high risk of aspiration because of recurrent seizures. She has papilledema grade 2, which indicates raised ICP, and her platelets are also 90,000, sir. So do we still proceed with regional anesthesia, sir?
So Sushmita, you are not convinced of giving regional anesthesia still after giving so much of explanations. Still, I will further clarify your doubt. Based on your assessment from the patient, you have informed me that patient is conscious, obeying oral commands. So it clearly shows that patient can protect her airway. Second point, papilledema is even seen in severe preeclampsia patients. So that is not considered to be a definitive sign of raised ICP. So only if the patient is having any localizing signs, we can consider that to be a raised ICP. Third point, the lab parameter clearly shows the platelet count of 90,000. And literature also supports that regional anesthesia can be given safely in these preeclampsia patients till 80,000. So we can very well proceed with the regional anesthesia in this patient.
But what is the harm in giving GA to this patient?
When compared to the normal pregnant females, these patients are considered to be potentially difficult airway because of increased venous engorgement, and there is always a risk of aspiration during the time of induction, and there is an exaggerated stress response to laryngoscopy during the time of intubation as well as during the time of extubation. And moreover, from your assessment, the patient has received magnesium sulfate, both loading dose as well as maintenance dose. So there is an interaction of the magnesium sulfate with anesthetic agents that causes prolonged neuromuscular blockade. So these are the factors that favors why we should avoid general anesthesia in this patient.
Okay, sir. Then, sir, in which kind of patients or in which situations do we prefer general anesthesia?
Good. Let me tell certain conditions where you want general anesthesia in these kind of patients. So when the patient's hemodynamics are not stable, and the patient has low GCS, and the patient has throwing refractory seizures which warrants intubation, and the patient has refractory pulmonary edema and coagulopathy, we can consider general anesthesia in such kind of patients.
Ma'am, did the discussion went in a right way where they were discussing the valid points, and how do you choose, ma'am, like what do you do in such situations, ma'am?
Yes, Ashwini, definitely the discussion went in the right way. However, the few points I would like to add here, the regional anesthesia is definitely beneficial over general anesthesia in these patients, as it is easier to perform, and it has a quick onset of action, and there is feasibility of maintenance of spontaneous ventilation, and it also provides the post-operative analgesia. And if there are studies which show there is improvement of the intervenous blood flow by 70% in women who have preeclampsia. And with general anesthesia, it has been shown that there are chances of difficult and failed intubation, and there is increased risk of aspiration, and
Yes,
there
ma'am.
is increased sympathetic response following laryngoscopy and intubation. And regarding the drug interaction also, if we give neuromuscular blocking agents in a patient who has been given Maxel, there is delayed recovery from general anesthesia.
Yes,
So in our patient, I feel the can you show the next slide?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We need to start with the detailed history, examination, and investigations. Regarding in the history, I would start by asking right from the fasting status, the presence of comorbidities, associated comorbidities, the time of the last seizure episode, how is the patient's sensorium now, and I would correlate with the result of any imaging studies which I have, and what are the present BP records during the past 24 hours, and what are the echo findings, how is the auscultation, chest on auscultation, any murmur is present or not, and what are the blood investigations showing, is there any presence of coagulopathy, DIC, low platelets, what is the HB of the patient, any signs of hepatic failure or renal failure, what is the urine output during the last 24 hours. So depending on all these conditions, if the patient is showing the signs of severe preeclampsia in the form of persistent high BP records and presence of bilateral creps, presence of coagulopathy, then definitely I would go for general anesthesia. However, if the patient is conscious and does not show any signs of raised ICP and has controlled blood pressure from
Yes, like in our patient, ma'am.
yes, and has normal urine output, I can go for regional spinal anesthesia in this patient.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And ma'am, what is your take-home point on this fluid management in preeclamptic patients, ma'am?
Yes, the fluid management in these patients is very important because these patients are already volume depleted, plus they have leaky capillaries and low colloid oncotic pressure. So we have to give fluid
in a very titrated manner. The studies recommend administration of 1 ml per kg per hour in these fluids with constant monitoring of the patient's consciousness, the chest, and the urine output. So there is no role of liberal fluid therapy or restricted fluid therapy, and there is no role of CVP monitoring, as the CVP does not correlate with the left heart filling pressures. So only in cases in which there is refractory pulmonary edema, in the associated peripartum cardiomyopathy, the CVP monitoring and the invasive arterial monitoring has been recommended. Otherwise, we can just administer fluid with constant urine output and chest presence of the basically the lung ultrasound or lung auscultation can be done during the perioperative management of preeclampsia patients.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much on that. So we have the 5th audience poll question. While treating eclamptic women, all of the following are goals except. So before we get the answers, we have come to the end of the session. Just a last slide on emphasis on soft skills. So as anesthesiologists, we always and most of the times we encounter critical situations, emergency situations where we have to critically think, and we have to be very fast in decision making. So it will be very good to improve our soft skills regarding critical thinking, decision making, and we develop the team leadership qualities and working as a team. And whenever we are handling the patients, the prior concern should be patient safety, and we should be very careful with whenever we explaining to the patient attenders about the status, prognosis. So I think we should develop all these soft skills along with the management part too. So that's the last slide. So I've come to the end of this session. I thank sincerely AOA, Professor Kajal ma'am and Professor Anju ma'am, who are coordinators of this workshop, for giving me this opportunity. I thank my entire residents who have helped in creating this video. Also Dr. Anish in guiding this video flow and all, and also to the JIPMER studio team. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.